Hi, I'm Professor Kelly Kaufhold at Texas State, and I'm going to talk with you about data journalism. Let me ask you a couple of questions about that. Is data journalism new, and is data visualization new? No and no. We're all keeping a close eye on the coronavirus, and we should. You know that South by Southwest got canceled for the first time since it was founded in 1987. I bet all of you are closely watching for data. The number of cases, the spread, the mortality rate. What if I told you the same thing happened, people paying close attention to an outbreak, journalists using data, 170 years ago? There was a case in 1849 in New York, the New York Tribune, where some reporters thought there might be a cholera outbreak. And cholera is a nasty infection of the intestine. They definitely wanted to know about it. And there had been some history. There was a global outbreak in the 1830s. New York, being a port city, had seen some cases of that. So if you thought there was some kind of disease outbreak, what do you think you'd do? You'd go find an expert to talk to, and you'd look for some data. They went and found an expert, Professor William Gillespie at Union College in New York. And he was a math prof, by the way, but he also kept trend numbers in a log. And that led to this. In the fall of 1849, a clear spike from a couple hundred cases in May to more than 1,000 in July. No deaths in May to more than 700 deaths in July. Basically, the whole story told in one chart. If you happen to be interested, by the way, in disease outbreaks, vaccine trends, data on the opioid crisis, the cost and availability of medicines, a bunch of other health-related issues, the New York Times now has a whole section on health and disease. Lots of it's data-driven. It's newyorktimes.com/section/upshot. It's definitely worth a look. And actually, that New York Tribune story on the cholera outbreak in 1849, it wasn't even the first data journalism. The Guardian in London actually reported on student enrollment and the cost of education in England using data in 1821, and they visualized it in their newspaper. Some things about data journalism are new. So the internet has matured, and there's a lot more data available, and it's more prevalently available. So we get more data available and more visualizations. Let me ask you about that concept of more data. I bet some of you have a 1 terabyte hard drive, right? That's a lot of data. A terabyte, it's 1,000 gigabytes, maybe even a 2 terabyte hard drive. So you think that's a bunch of data, but let me put it in perspective. Imagine 1,000 terabytes. That equals 1 petabyte. Now imagine 1,000 petabytes. That's 1 exabyte. So an exabyte is 1 billion megabytes. That's a crap load of data, right? The reason I'm walking you through all this is you'll be able to appreciate the biggest difference in data now compared to a decade ago, and it's this. That number comes from the Tao Center for Journalism in Columbia University in New York. We, all of us with our online habits, our movements using our cell phone, dancing in and out of apps, writing things, consuming things online, all of us together generate 2.5 exabytes of data. That's 2.5 billion megabytes of data every day. So that's the main reason for this module. A lot more data is being generated regularly, daily, and a lot more data is publicly available. And more data available means more opportunities for you. And that's what we're going to talk about. Here's a quote from Woody Claude Flowers. He's the founder of the first robotics competition. Nobody will pay you to know the data, but people will line up to pay you to do something creative with the data. And that's what we'll be doing in this module. I'm going to show you how to get data and then how to do something creative with it. So again, this is a look at discrete data, and this is pretty generally available all over the country. You can do this in most counties in the country. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go search the Bexar County Appraisal District. This is the taxing authority in San Antonio, Texas, which is just south of San Marcos. And I can click on Bexar County Appraisal District, and then I'm going to select Property Search. And again, you can do this in thousands of counties around the country. There's a neat neighborhood there called Alamo Heights, and there's a road called Alamo Heights Boulevard. So I'm going to go search Alamo Heights Boulevard, and then we'll see what houses come up. And what I'm looking for is just a couple of things that I can compare one against the other. So what it shows is these are the addresses, the owners. Over here are the prices. You can click on the map, the details. So let me just look and see if I see any patterns. This is kind of interesting. So here's a 600 block Alamo Heights Boulevard. It's worth $600,000. Here's a house in the 600 block of Alamo Heights Boulevard that's worth $800,000. These two houses, $600,000, $800,000, are just up the road from each other. So what I'm going to do is, in a couple of new tabs, open View Details, and we'll go see what the deal is, why the Casillas house is worth a lot more than the Busquets house. So Let me start over here. This is the Bousquier house. And so it's, if I go to improvement building, it'll show me 2,700 square feet, built in 1942. Let's jump over here and do the same thing. Improvement building, 2,300 square feet. So this house is smaller and yet appraised higher. If you look over here, the smaller house is the Cassia, $795,000. So how come that house costs more? Well, if you go down in improvements, you can see they've added on a section of living room. They've added on another living area section. This house added a swimming pool 5 years ago. They've got a patio, an elaborate patio that they built in back. They added a separate porch with a cover on it. So this house has had a number of improvements since the 1970s, and that's why that house is appraised higher than one just up the road by a couple $100,000. And so that's what you can do with discrete data. Again, we'll spend most of our time in this class working with aggregate data, which is a whole lot of cases aggregated together to let you tell about trends, patterns, make predictions, that sort of thing. You can use aggregate data to tell individual stories. And actually, here's a fun one. The Los Angeles Angels baseball team offered a $400 million 12-year contract to outfielder Mike Trout that guaranteed him a job, paying $35 million a year until he's 39 years old. Is he worth it? The 538 blog, Nate Silver, says yes, and he uses aggregate data to make his case. So he looks at Mike Trout's performance compared to other similar players in similar situations over the years, and he sort of grades it. He finds out that Mike Trout is actually a better bet for this kind of contract, even out 12 years, than most other outfielders. A bunch of news outlets do a great job taking aggregate data and turning it into what we call the user experience. They take that data and they arrange it so that you can tell your own story. And your story may be different from my story. We might approach data and a data interactive in different ways and be interested in some different things. And that's an important part of involving you, engaging you in telling your own story. Let me show you some examples. ProPublica does a great job with this. They have a whole investigative section on the opioid epidemic, and it's essentially focused on where the drugs come from. They built a multi-year database that shows which company produced the drugs, and which doctors are most likely to distribute them, which doctors benefit, profit the most from these interactions with the pharmaceutical companies. It's this brilliant, searchable interactive that allows for personalizing the story. Ohio's kind of ground zero for this epidemic, and that's my home state. So let me check there and sort by dollar amount. Dr. Lawrence Lynn actually earns royalties on the delivery mechanism for these drugs, but Adolph Lombardi, he just prescribes opioids to his patients. Look, $7 million over 3 years. California must have the highest paid prescriber of opioids, don't you think? Let's take a look. It's close. Dr. Narayan is an investor in a couple of pharmaceutical companies. Dr. ElAttrache earns royalties for helping develop and test some of the drugs. Still, that's a lot of money in 3 years. And right here in Texas, one orthopedic surgeon just down the road from us in San Antonio, he gets royalties, more than $20 million from just 2 companies who sell opioid medications, and over $60 million total in 3 years. That's pretty stunning. Okay, here's a great, really useful interactive one. It programmed a bunch of candidate issue positions, and it recommends a candidate that most closely aligns with your views. I side with, and this is a fun one that I'll put a link to. You can go through here, and if you're undecided on political candidates, this one makes a recommendation. And in fact, this one recommended a candidate that probably wouldn't have been my first choice or second choice. Okay, last thing. Say you want to find your own data and then tell your own story with it. Not a story told using data, but the actual data itself. Maybe in an Excel format or CSV, which is a comma-separated values format that you can then import into Excel. Maybe you want to find data like that and then sort it, a big batch of aggregate data. Can you do that? Yes, you can, and I'm going to show you how. All you do is you tell Google what file type you're searching for, and here's how you do it. So I'm just going to do a Google search for data, but I'm going to give Google some specific parameters to help with my search. So Texas has seen a huge in-migration of people moving here from other states, and so what I'm curious about is how many people have come here from other states. And in fact, the place you're going to be this summer, San Marcos, has topped the national list a couple of times for the most people moving here. So what I can do is just put in population change state data, or by state, and we're going to search this. And I'll add the word data. Sometimes that makes a difference. It brings up a search, and if you look, I see census data, which is one of the things I'm looking for. USA Today has an article on it, but I'm going to go over here and click Settings. And under Settings, there's a really cool thing under Advanced Search. So I'm going to hit Settings, Advanced Search, and down here you'll see File Type. What I can do is tell it, instead of any format, I want Excel spreadsheet data. So I'm going to select XLS and then click Advanced Search. And all of a sudden my search, instead of giving me all kinds of stuff, USA Today articles, gives me census data XLS files. You'll see XLS after XLS, one after another. And you can select one of these and it'll automatically download. And when that data downloads, I'm going to go open it up. And it'll give me a little window here at the bottom, which I will make full screen. And here's my data. So the part I'm interested in is percent change in this column, 2000 to 2010, by location. Now, I could try to sort just by picking a column, but it's going to give me an error because some of the data in here, I mean, some of the spaces in this column aren't data. There's a blank one. Some of these are 6 columns merged into one. I don't want that. What I want is the actual data. So what I'm going to do is select United States in the upper left corner, and then in the bottom right, click on this 5.8. I'm going to hold Shift and click, and it highlights all of the data cells. So here's all my data selected. Now what I'm going to do is just Control-click. On a PC, you would right-click. I'm going to Control-click and select Sort, Custom Sort. And then what I'm going to do is, I'm interested in this column, which is 2000 to 2010 percent change. So I'm going to sort by column R, and I want largest to smallest. And when I hit OK, it will change all of this. And what it shows me is Texas is indeed very high on this list. Texas is 4th on this list of states where the most people moved between 2000 and 2010. Nevada's at the top at 35%. Texas is at 20%. And so Texas got a 20% increase in population. The whole nation's population increased by 9%. Texas's population outpaced the U.S. population growth by a 2-to-1 margin. Twice as many people moved here as moved to the U.S. in general. Okay, let's do another one. Let me go do another search. This time I'm curious about which state has highest levels of education. So let me do this. I'm still going to, I think, keep by state, but let's search level of education by state. I'm going to leave data, and what you'll see is when I went into Settings Advanced Search, it added this special search parameter at the end. I'm just going to type that myself. So here's the other thing you can do is file type dot XLS. Just add that to the end of a search. I'll hit enter. And again, I'm going to get Excel spreadsheets that show me the data. So here's another one I'm curious about. Educational attainment by state. I click on it, it downloads. Let's go open it up. And we'll glance. And again, this is a very similar data set to the other one. What I'm curious about is the most recent year available, 2009, advanced degree or more by percentage. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'll click on this first cell. And then I can Control-click, or again on a PC, right-click, Sort, Custom Sort. And what I want to do is look for this column, 10.3. If you notice, that's what's at the top of this column. That's the title. So I'm going to hit 10.3, and again, largest to smallest. And if you look, the area around the nation's capital, District of Columbia, Maryland, Virginia, even Connecticut nearby, have the most people with a master's or a doctoral degree. So that's a look at how you can search data, grab it, and do a quick sort. During your lecture in May, when we're together for half a day on one of these lectures, I'm going to show you a bunch more things in Excel. So I'll show you how to bring data in, how to sort it, some other tricks. We'll be able to compare 2, sometimes even 3 variables within pivot tables. You'll be able to draw some conclusions, start telling a story out of data. I'll show you that. I'll also show you a couple of visualization techniques. One's using Google Maps. Another one actually takes your Excel spreadsheet, turns it into active, interactive pie graphs, bar charts, that kind of thing. So you'll see some of those tools and how quickly you can take data, sort it, clean it, and then interpret it into a data interactive. And they're all going to be skills you'll learn in that half-day session and be able to teach your students down the road.